My name is Maria and I'm based here in Puebla, Mexico. In the fall of 2001, I received what is known within the indigenous communities as an ancestral call. An ancestral call is whereby a person answers the call to know ancient wisdom, which is revealed to him or her through a series of lived experiences and gradually acquired on the external journey, to be transformed internally and then may work as a traditional healer within one's community. In the early summer of 2002, I set off from Ireland via England into Arizona and then in the fall down into Mexico. Similar to what the Indigenous people refer to as the epic journey of the hummingbird who travels from northern Canada into Mexico. For Indigenous people, hummingbird medicine is the wisdom teachings of medicine traditions of America. The hummingbird represents embarking on the hero's journey, not that of a victim. Defying against all odds, skin color, upbringing, gender, a person is called to embark on one's heart or soul calling. This journey, represented by this tiny little bird with little wings who doesn't know where it's going to get its food or honey, simply trusts and says yes to the adventure. While in Arizona, I was led to Lake Powell. Shortly after being there, I learned that I was near the Native American tribe known as Navajo Nation. A little while later, I got a job working as a tour guide and also as a river raft guide working on the river. It was here that I came to meet with and speak with some of the people from Navajo community. They began to share with me a little more of their cosmovision. And also some of the challenges that they face due to the aftermath of the conquest of their people. One day, while working on the boat on the lake, I was taken to a sacred site for the Navajo people known as Rainbow Bridge. When the eagle of the north gets together with the condor of the south, it's time for all the rainbow tribes of the world to come together and bring peace upon this world. In the fall, I began to make the journey south into Mexico. I was guided to be in Puebla, which is in the center of Mexico. And there, after some time, I began to wonder why I was being brought there, what it was that I needed to do. And shortly afterwards, I was led to speak with a youth who struggled with addiction. Also, I began to teach English to a 7-year-old little girl. And after some time with her, I began to realize that she was a very involved soul for the way she thought, spoke, and just her whole way of being. And she also had a very deep connection with the natural world, the plants and the animals, and innately had healing gifts. The Indigenous elders from different communities said that we would begin to see young people with old spirits, very young children who'd sound like elders when they spoke. On listening, the adult may ask, how does she or he know this? Their mission is to assist humanity to heal ourselves and our earth, and to learn how to live in balance and harmony with natural law. I then came to teach English in both the public and the private schools of Puebla. In the spring of 2004, I was guided to move to the Indigenous communities in the northeastern Sierra of Puebla. When there, I once again came to work with the children and youth in the schools. And also with adults within the governmental institutions and the non-governmental institutions. In this, I came to know of the governmental policies and programs that often stifle the Indigenous people's way of life and also causes dependence rather than self-governance. Sometime later in 2005, I met the leader of an addiction treatment center and he invited me to collaborate with them. I spent about 2 years with them, and I also began to work with the children in a women's shelter. So through that, I came to understand the conditions that the children and the youth are living in due to the poverty, the domestic abuse, and addictions. In 2007, I met some women who invited me to go to one of the communities outside of Quetzalten's town centre. And here we began to share some of the Indigenous people's cosmovision through different activities, games, dances, art, drama, storytelling. Traditionally, it's understood that humans and nature create a co-alliance together. No separation exists between the metaphysical and physical, between the divine and the human, between life and death. But on the contrary, there is a continuum and a mutual dependence and reciprocity between us and the phenomenal world. After this, I decided to set up a non-profit organization to assist with the children's needs, both on an emotional level and also on an educational level, that would honor and respect their cosmovision and their way of life. Similar to the Native American Rainbow Mission, the Mayan people said that when we would see 4 colors of corn on the same kernel, black, white, yellow, and red, humanity would have reached an elevated state of consciousness that would enable unity to exist among all. In December of that year, 2008, I decided to return to Ireland in order to prepare for working with a diverse population, and there began a series of studies in early childhood education, community development, nature conservation, addiction studies, and counselling. This time not only gave me an insight into the diverse disciplines and the educational programs within my country, but also gave me an insight into how things are there. In 2010, while I was taking a counselling course in Cork, I began to recognise that the information that I was acquiring there was really not going to be appropriate for the people in the Indigenous communities where I was. And there came a point where I really felt I'd hit a brick wall in reference to the lack of understanding of these ethnic groups. And hence remember calling out to the universe, asking for some guidance on this. A short while later, one of my college mates came to visit with me in Waterford, where I was staying, and on showing her the project that I had written up for the Indigenous communities, she instantly said to me, "Oh wow, now I know why I heard about this non-profit organisation that works with Indigenous communities to overcome the issues of domestic violence and addiction. They are known as White Bison." Instantly, on doing some research around their treatment model, I began to recognise the need to work with more culturally sensitive programs to aid people in these communities. After this, I was led to an area known as Wicklow. And there I was brought to reconnect back into my own Celtic heritage. In this, I came to realize that the North American as well as the Mexican Indigenous communities' cosmovision is very similar to my own Celtic heritage. In 2012, after 4 years, I returned to Mexico. About a year later, in 2013, I was guided to work in an urban community here in Puebla City known as Romero Vargas, which is a red hotspot for children and youth where there are issues with addiction and domestic violence. Studies have shown that if children experience an adverse childhood experience, such as living with a parent or close family member with addiction, or is being abusive in the home, or if there is a household mental illness, or separation, divorce, a death of a family member or parent, incarceration, this child is more likely to experience long-term effects on one's health. If there is no early intervention for children between the ages of 6 and 12, they may experience depression, anxiety, have difficulties in school with learning and also with conduct, and may even begin to experiment with illicit drugs. Teenagers may begin smoking, using drugs, become pregnant, or have suicide attempts. If there is no early intervention with adults, they may experience mental and physical disease. Here, along with others, we began to initiate child, youth, and family programs. In 2014, while I was doing some research to create a children's program for the children of alcoholics, I once again came across the work of White Bison, and a year later went to Colorado Springs to take training in one of their programs known as Celebrating Families. Celebrating Families is a culturally sensitive program that was created by White Bison and NACOA, National Association for the Children of Alcoholics, to work with the family members who are affected by adverse childhood experiences from 3 years of age. On this program, I came to know the true story about what happened to the Native American people during the European conquest. As a result of being exposed to generations of violent colonization, assimilation policies, and having suffered many losses, over time the Native American people's culture and way of life began to suffer. The clan system became disintegrated. They began to feel disconnected from their community. They lost their traditional family values. When these issues are not healed within one generation, they get passed down into the next and the next and the next, until there's an intervention, and this cycle of what they call historical trauma or intergenerational trauma can be deterred. The North American people prophesied that after a long winter, they would come into a healing time, in which they would heal from the unresolved grief and loss, and also the effects of intergenerational trauma. And they say that right now, with the birth of the White Bison in 1994, it was a sign that the great healing time had begun. It had not only begun for the Indigenous communities, but also they said that it would begin for the non-Indigenous communities alike. In January of 2016, the training of Celebrating Families program leaders was started, and then some months later we implemented the program in Romero Vargas' secondary school with youth at high risk and their family members. From 2017 to 2020, I went to the men's jail known as San Miguel in Puebla to attain some assistance in making some of the Montessori materials. while there, in dealing and speaking with the inmates, I began to understand many things. I learned from speaking with the social worker that about 65% of the men have issues with addiction, and that in order to maintain their habit, had become involved with crime. I heard of a chaplain who came to work with many offenders, and on listening to their stories, he recognized a common thread had occurred in their early childhood, and that was that they had been severely abused. Many were not aware of what abuse was, or had recognized how this had impacted the decisions they made in their life, and as a result, how their lives had turned out. As there is no set rehab program in place, many of the men, after being released within 3 to 6 months, are involved in other crimes and are readmitted. This has caused an overcrowding within the jail. Mexico is not isolated in this incident. Our neighbour the US has similar issues, however, has reached out to Germany, Sweden and Norway to attain insight into how they are working to assist their offenders successfully attain rehabilitation and be reinserted back into their families and communities. In 2019, I went to Chicago, the one of White Bison's facilitation programs known as Warrior Down. The term Warrior Down refers to the shout-out used when a person is hurt or incapacitated in some way and needs help. The Warrior Down program offers support and appropriate resources for this warrior who is in his process of recovery and reintegrating back into his family and community life in a successful way. On returning from Chicago, as I was reading through the material I had received and did some further research, I came across a story of an incident that had occurred in a mother and baby home in Ireland. And on delving further, I came across other incidences that happened in the other institutions there. On reflecting upon this, I came to note that the unhealed hurt of our ancestors is still impacting us today. After the Irish attained independence from Britain and set up the Free State, they amalgamated with the Irish Catholic Church. After the revised constitution was set in place in 1937, it enabled De Valera to achieve many of his policy goals. This determined how the deemed issues that the Irish population presented with were going to be addressed, such as mental health issues, addictions, domestic abuse, poverty, crime, and disruptive youth. As well as the issue of women having children outside of wedlock. These issues were addressed by placing these people in institutions to contain such. And many operated for nearly 100 years, leaving their legacy on the Irish psyche till today. In this, the Irish, who had been oppressed, became the oppressor. The internalized shame and low self-esteem sought to rectify itself by Irish Puritanism and holiness, hiding away those who threatened this ideal moral code of conduct. And anyone who questioned or spoke out about this abuse of power were declared to be insane, and often with the assistance of the community and the authorities, were locked away in a mental institution for the rest of their lives. What happened in North America and in Ireland happened in other countries throughout the world. Here in Mexico, the Spanish ruled for 300 years. Here we can see the impact of centuries of unhealed intergenerational trauma. And in order to break the cycle, as a humanity, we need to embark on the epic journey of Hummingbird. In this, humanity goes through its own inner transformation or a great turnover, so that we do not repeat the same mistakes as we have done in the last 2,000 years, in which there has been a great abuse of our natural resources and also of others. Rather than locking away the cries of centuries of intergenerational trauma, we can come together to heal ourselves, our families and communities. So that the generations that are coming up behind us may develop in healthy ways, mentally, emotionally, physically and spiritually, in our family, educational, social, community, religious and judicial systems. The Indigenous elders spoke of the need for humanity to make an epic journey. The hummingbird only drinks from the nectar, the direction of the wisdom teachings of our Indigenous healers. This is the medicine that we're going to need right now to make the great transformation, so that we can create a new world that our ancestors and generations unborn would be proud of. In this, each individual needs to go through their own internal process in which they face their fears, go through the dark night of the soul, so that they may become the person that they know in their heart they need to be. In this, we are being of service to our families and communities and becoming the unborn healer that exists within each of us. We can call upon the medicine of Hummingbird to assist us attain the courage that we need to make this journey, individually and as a collective. of August to be the International Day for Indigenous Communities in honour of their contribution to humanity. I appreciate your support in assisting to enable the healing of our families and communities, both in the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities of our world.